right, well, here we are with Personal Money Planning, Michelle and Tina. We're doing our Mindful Money series. And if you can advance the slide to remind me what we're talking about, because I'm being mindful. And today we're being mindful about your boo and you. And this is kind of talking money with your honey that we called it last year. But we have a little bit of a different spin on it this year. So Michelle's going to talk a little bit more about, different things about how money can impact your most important relationships.
We're going to see if you're compatible, and if not, how you can become compatible with your partner.
And why some of those things happen. Like I said, I'm Tina. I am the marketing manager. I'm a credit counselor as well. And then Michelle Kuhner. She's a CHFC, FPQP, CRPC, CFF, CCC, CFHC. Say that 10 times fast. And the president of Personal Money Planning. She found this quote, and actually, didn't you say you heard him say this at a Tina Ameritrade conference?
Yeah, it was back in when you could travel like normal. It was back in 2019, and I think he was one of the keynote speakers at the TD Ameritrade conference. And I tried to look online for this quote to, to find like a better picture of it. But I wrote it down, and I actually posted it on Facebook at that time because I thought it was kind of a neat quote. If you can't speak money, you'll be broke for the rest of your life. Actually, at the time, I thought it was kind of like, wow, this is really snooty, about you have to learn how to speak this way. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. If you can't speak the same language as your partner or understand how this money language works, it can definitely impact your life. And that's really what we're going to be talking about a lot today is how you speak, because sometimes even though our partner hears us, they may not quite understand us, and how we interpret their actions to our language can really impact what we are doing and how we communicate. To give you just a funny story, I told Tina about this yesterday, and I think I've written it on my blog before, but many years ago, my mom and I and my son went to Italy, and one of our little excursions, we were running around Rome and Vatican City, and we were looking because we had been walking forever. And of course, we had been to Milan, so I got some amazingly cute shoes. And you should not walk around 10 miles a day in brand new shoes, by the way. Just kind of a note. So we had miserably big blisters, and we needed some water and some Band-Aids for our camera. And so we didn't know where to get all this stuff. Obviously, there is no, Walmart over there, or there wasn't at the time, at least. And so we were walking around looking, and my mom approached someone, and she's not an international traveler. And so she walked up to this guy and said, "Excuse me, where is the Walmarto?" And she thought just by adding an O to the end of each word, it suddenly magically made it Italian. I could understand. She knew what she was saying, and I could somewhat understand what she was trying to relay. And it was funny because the gentleman turned around and he looked at us and he said, "You're not from around here, are you?" And he happened to be a visiting priest from Chicago. And so he could somewhat understand what we were saying as well. And so, of course, he called someone over and said, "Where are you going after this?" We said, "Back to the hotel." He called the taxi driver over, one that apparently he trusted, and said, "This is where they need to go get them batteries, water, and Band-Aids, and then take them to the hotel." So we want to make sure that how you're talking to your spouse isn't kind of not the correct way. And we're not just adding an O to the end of everything to change the language. So we're going to be looking at the language of money today. Now, Tina, when you hear the term language of money, what immediately comes to mind?
Well, honestly, I didn't say this yesterday, but I think the language of money, I'm like, oh, stocks, bonds, and credit, and all of these things. is what comes to mind, like the the vocabulary words rather than how you speak, which I think that this is more what we need to talk about with how we speak.
Right. And it's really how you view things, how you understand things, and how you express those understandings and those meanings, just like we do with the spoken language or with sign language. We make different and I'm not a sign language person, but we make different expressions to relay a certain item or a certain message that you want to get across. And we're doing the same thing with language of money. And that's really is, just trying to relay those feelings, those emotions, and express yourself in a certain way. And when it comes to understanding language between two people, the number one reason, and we saw this last year in a couple of our webinars, that the number one cause of turmoil or arguments in a relationship is money issues. Now, it's not the number one cause of divorce. Number one cause of divorce was being a big fat cheat. We said number one is big fat cheat. Number two is big fat spender. And that's what we're really looking at here. It's the number one cause of arguments. And a lot of that is because the two people in the relationship aren't speaking the same language when it comes to money. So if you learn to understand your partner's language, the fears that they have, the goals that they have, it can really help minimize some of these disagreements or misunderstandings. And so having this open and honest discussion and viewing these different financial viewpoints and the way that we the money makes us feel is, I mean, let's face it, if you have someone that is not very good at money and you have someone that's very good at money, you certainly can see that it might be a little bit dangerous to kind of approach that person and say, look, we've got to have this discussion because you really are terrible at this. And that's not what we're trying to, the way that we want to approach it, but being able to be open-minded and realize what weaknesses you have when it comes to this. And we always say, and even in the office, Tina, we kind of, go over and say, let's all use our strengths, because it doesn't make sense that I keep trying to, to do something and it's causing me so much trouble and so much work when Tina's like really good at it, like writing. I jot something down, and how many times do I just send something over and say, massage it? That's kind of what we do. And so since she's so good at that, I don't want to waste my energy doing it. And she can do it so much faster and so much better. So why not use our strengths? So that's what we're really going to talk about today, because each person having an input into this, and their feelings, their goals, their input, and their participation into this joint financial journey is really important, because when you collaborate, then it feels like no one's really being left out, that their feelings are taken into account. Some of what they want is being noticed and not ignored. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So any idea, Tina, how you would determine which money language you speak?
Well, I would think that you're going to speak the language that makes most sense to your personality. So however you deal with money is how you deal with other things in your life as well. And when we start talking about the money languages, you see how it's all starts to tie together. So big part of that is your personality.
It is, and
your background.
We see a lot of that. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and just your background, your life experiences and things. And that's, of course, what can develop a lot of your personality.
Right. What we learn and things over time is kind of what makes us who we are. And so when we look at the money language, whether we want to say it's language or personality, there are a ton of quizzes out there. And there are some that are free. There are some that have a small charge to them. I pulled up one, and this was years ago, and it gave me like this 12-page report. And I definitely didn't want to read through all of that. I just kind of wanted an idea of what my strengths and weaknesses are. So there are others that offer just a simple synopsis. So we're going to look at some of those simple ones today. And if you feel like, you really want to dig into this some more, I encourage you to, hit the Google streets and grab your credit card and find one of these more detailed reports. But if the goal is simply to gain a better understanding of how you and your partner kind of feel about money while discovering some of those underlying reasons, like Tina mentioned, some of these life experiences that create these feelings and fears for us, then we are going to cover those for you today. Now, I think we talk about behavioral finance a lot and how some of our feelings translate into how we deal with money. And Dr. Kenneth Doyle, and if you want to pull up his name, it's Doyle. He is a financial psychologist and retired financial planner. So two of my favorite things to kind of put together. And he's actually blended these two fields to determine that there are really just like 4 basic money languages. And each of these profiles kind of have a different outlook and a different approach when dealing with money. They all have different weaknesses and different strengths as well. And so by understanding which profile you more closely relate to, it kind of helps maybe aid you in rounding the edges of some of those weaknesses, and then also determining the weaknesses of your partner can determine their weaknesses as well, so y'all can work more closely together and accomplish those goals. So the 4 basic money languages are the driver, the analytic, the amiable, and the expressive. Now, I kind of put a little description on each one. And the driver is someone that is just totally money centric. This means that when it comes to how they feel about money, it's money equals success. So if you have a lot of money, you're successful. That's what they want. And I think we use the term, like what is the Tom Cruise movie, Tina, the Show Me the Money?
Oh, yeah. Jerry Maguire.
Jerry Maguire. And so this is really a typical Jerry Maguire situation where having money protects against fear of incompetence. And the more money they have, the more successful and competent they feel. Drivers communicate love by showing how much money is done for not only them, but their loved ones as well. And their weaknesses, though, you want to take a guess at what a weakness might be?
Well, I mean, if they're only focused on money, that's all they're going to get. They may think that they're building up relationships because they are being successful, but really, if they are only focused on getting money, that might mean they're only spending time at the office and not going home ever. It may mean that it's so important to get the money that they fall into shady dealings. Things like that. I was in a call yesterday with one of a guy talking about cybercrime, and there are actually job boards for people, for hackers, and you can make. It was talking about making like $60,000 a month, and they would have, So if your drive is only money, you could fall into some unfortunate circumstances.
That's true. I didn't think about it from that perspective, but you're absolutely right. And I actually went to a cybersecurity conference a couple years back, again, when you could travel, and they actually had one of these hackers there. And I guess after they arrested him, he kind of went to work and showed some of these loopholes and vulnerabilities within people's systems. So that's what they do now. They hire him out to look at these vulnerabilities in their platform. So very interesting. The weakness that that these drivers have can be that since they're so overly dependent on money, if they don't have this, it directly affects their self-esteem. Since they equate money to success, if they don't have the money, then they're unsuccessful. And if they're unsuccessful, it lowers their self-esteem. And ironically, this really deep sense of, I need the money, and that it has a direct impact on their self-esteem, can lead to a sense of an inadequacy. And, that I'm not good enough. I need to do this. I'm failing for my family. And so it's just this vicious cycle that, they constantly have to be on high alert or on overdrive for this, acquiring this money. And we saw this a little bit last month when we talked about the financial bias of hedonic adoption, to where, if you get a raise, you were perfectly happy at what you were doing. You were paying your bills. You were even maybe putting some money in savings. You had an adequate emergency fund. But if you get this raise, then that becomes the new norm, and it's hard to go back to what you were before. And so that's what we tend to see, especially with the drivers, because they're very materialistic. Since they're so hyper focused on money, they're very materialistic. And so it's almost like they have to keep spending and acquiring to gain that next high for them. And having to, where a new Tesla may have been good for them, now they want a fleet of Teslas. And so it's one of those, that they're just going to keep chasing this forever. And so understanding, if you do relate to this personality, understanding what those weaknesses are and working on those weaknesses can help, not only you become more financially stable, but it helps you relate more so to your partner as well. The analytic is someone that uses money as a security blanket. It's a source of security to protect them from life's unexpected events. And I don't know if we can use 2020 and, with COVID 2020 and Snowvid now 2021, we've seen a lot of these unexpected events that we don't think are going to happen, or at least as close together as they have. And so it's having that bigger security blanket. And this, what we've seen in the last year and a half, is really just driving these analytics and saying, we need more of a security blanket. And so it's more like a Scrooge. I guess we can use the term Scrooge for it, because they just have to accumulate. And having, just like with the drivers that are accumulate to spend more money to show this love, the analytics want to accumulate to save, to show this love to their loved ones. They want to make sure that they have enough saved up and are taking care of their loved ones. They tend to be very structured and organized when it comes to following a budget, and they have little trouble establishing and maintaining a very detailed budget. And I think when we talked about last month with the person coming in with their budget, and they were like detailing every dairy product they had, this would definitely be the analytic type of language that she was speaking. Their plans typically include short and long-term goals, and they don't really have a problem achieving both of those. In fact, we tend to see with analytics, they may set a goal, let's say an Alaskan cruise, and they set that goal. And then once they've achieved that goal, what do you think happens, Tina?
It's like, well, I don't know if I really want to spend the money. I got to that goal. Now what?
Yeah, it's going to be hard for them to let go of that security blanket, even if it's just a small little swath of cloth. They don't want to give that up, because what happens if something else happens and I need that money for something else? So their weakness tends to be this very militant or authoritative style in their budgeting techniques. And those around them, the I guess the aftermath of it is that they feel less important than the money. They're like, I don't feel like you care more about that than you do what we want. And especially if you have, like, let's say a driver that is very money centric, but they want to spend a lot. And then your partner is an analytic who wants to, accumulate money for the safety blanket, not spend as much. You may have some friction there. And so understanding these weaknesses and along with those strengths for both of those is really important. We also have the amiable. And this is someone that identifies, or anyone that identifies with this personality actually is one that's more, they feel love is money. Love shows money and affection. And it's really centric towards people and relationships. They tend to communicate love through sharing what they have with their friends and family. They tend to be extremely generous and very good-hearted, which can also lead to them being poor money managers and also being able to really plan long-term types of goals. Since money means love and affection, the lack thereof transfers to or translates to the inability to demonstrate this love. So, if they don't have the money to be able to share these certain things, they don't feel like they're showing enough love to those that they love. And Tina, I think you mentioned a little bit on something of this yesterday when we were chatting about how, if even though you're good-hearted, you may have someone, and we call this bilingual, but you may have someone that's very focused and maybe they're partially a driver, but also an amiable. Did you have a friend that was similar to that?
Well, I'm not sure if this person was necessarily much of a driver. They just happened to be successful. It was just the field they chose was lucrative. And it seemed like they always were willing to share their money with anybody. It seems sometimes overly generous. And you just start to wonder if it's because they have this feeling like, oh, if I don't spend this because I have it, if I don't spend it, then I'm not going to get the love back. So that's, I think that's what I had mentioned with that.
Yeah, and a lot of times with this, and it's a good angle to pick up on is that while the amiable tends to buy things for people that they love, it's because they're showing love. This is their way of showing their loved ones their affection, but also are they spending this money to also receive that love? Because if they're buying these gifts and giving money or whatever the situation may be, then those people that they're giving it to may also show affection back to them. And so by not having this, ability to share with those that they love, they may also fear that they're not going to be receiving that back. So that is a very good angle to look at it. While sharing is caring, we don't want to go overboard. I think we say everything in moderation. But if you are with someone that is this, just basically giving until it hurts, then one thing that can do is make the person that they're with, their partner, feel that their financial security, future financial security is irrelevant. So, especially if I'm with an analytic and I'm an amiable and I want to spend, then the analytics, like you're not taking into consideration that I need this security blanket, that I need this amount to be in the account, and I don't want to give every penny that we earn away. So that's where we can see some friction as well. And then lastly, we have the expressive. And to this group, money equals acceptance. And it offers maybe the respect and admiration of others that they want to build relationships with, maybe someone in a certain group or a desirable group of people. We see this when we have like, I want to join the country club to show this status symbol, or I want to buy a certain car, let's say a high-end Tesla, because I want to be part of that group. And so they show their love through this, or I wouldn't even really call it love, but they express themselves by having these high-end things so they can then become part of the group that that they want to be. And
so this is buying, I'm sorry, they're buying their inclusion into a group.
Exactly. And it's the typical keeping up with the Joneses lifestyle. when we hear, you know, keeping up with the Joneses, we're communicating love through shopping and you know, just spending and buying to gain this respect of others. So people sit back and are like, oh, they're so lucky. Look, they're going on this big vacation, or they're doing this, or they just bought, you know, brand new phones every holiday for their family. You know, they feel like as people look at them, then they are highly sought after. They're a higher level or group, or they're super lucky. But in actuality, some of this spending is just really masking some really deep issues. For instance, hiding feelings of pain or insecurity or incompetence. We saw with the driver that, you know, having this money and this success, you know, has them, you know, feeling competent. And without that, then they don't feel it's a lower self-esteem. And that's somewhat what we see with the expressive as well. Their weakness is being overly dependent on money, and usually unsuccessfully they use it to solve problems and to calm fears, which is not what you need to do. Now, as with any language we speak, as Tina mentioned, it is an acquired skill. It's stuff that we learn as we grow up. And, you know, through our upbringing, through our childhood, through our adolescence. And we may even notice different dialects or even slang when it comes to the money language. We can, you know, there's like the formal and the informal. The formal may be, this is what I know I should be doing. This is, you know, I know that we should be putting back 10 to 20% into a savings, or I know that I should have this amount of an emergency fund. And where we see those different dialects may be, you know, someone that has not grown up with money, that they may feel that, okay, as long as I have $1,000 saved, I'm okay. Whereas someone else that has, you know, grown up to where it's a little more frugal, especially in analytic, they may think that having $20,000 is the safety net or the minimum that they'll need. So these are definitely different mindsets on it. And like I mentioned, as with the formal or informal language, the formal may be what we know we should do. The slang may be those impulse buys. Maybe we know that we shouldn't do it, but oh, it's like really cool. And like, I totally have a pair of electric blue and lime green 4-inch stilettos that have slang written all over it. I don't wear them. I think I've worn them maybe 4 times because, well, one, they're incredibly uncomfortable, but 2, I think it may just have like this block. Like I feel kind of guilty that I really didn't need it, and it was just an impulse buy. And so that could be one of those slang moments. And whether it's formal or informal, you know, the language that we're using, a lot of it is what we've learned as a child. We typically mimic or go the complete opposite direction of what our parents taught or what we witnessed our parents doing. And so understanding why, you know, some of your feelings happened and were ingrained during childhood will then help us understand better why you speak the certain language that you do. So we're going to look at some of the good and bad habits that we learned growing up that kind of give us this or drives us to a specific language. And so there are typically like 5 overall parenting types that really have a direct impact on the language that we speak. So our first one is if our parents were very frugal, and I'm talking extremely frugal during childhood. A lot of people tend to overspend to compensate the feelings of being deprived certain advantages as a child. And this overspending, and it's mostly resentful in nature. It's kind of like, well, I wasn't allowed to do this while I was growing up, so we are certainly going to do it. It tends to lead to a lot of, you know, lack of adequate funding for emergencies, for retirement, for, you know, for any type of savings. And it's obviously when you have any type of financial issues, then it can lead to marital discord. On the other hand, if that frugality was just rooted deep enough as a fear, then you may have adults finding themselves exhibiting these same thrifty spending habits. And as we mentioned with the analytic language, those close to someone with these very cautious spending habits may feel neglected or a disregard for their feelings, which ultimately is still going to lead to marital discord. And I think I mentioned in our talk yesterday, Tina, that my grandpa was extremely frugal, like very, very tight. And it's because he grew up and he witnessed the Great Depression. And for him, he had an entire closet that was just stockpiled with food and supplies. And so he just knew that if something happened, that was his security. That was his analytic, was to have a stockpile of food to make sure that you did not go without. And so he raised I have 4 aunts and my mom, so he had 5 girls, and he raised them all the same, but you have 2 of them went one way and 3 the other. And so you have 2 of my my aunts that are extremely tight. They're counting pennies. And I think I mentioned that one of them, if they have any type of ketchup packets or any kind of condiments, they keep those and squeeze them into the bottle. There's no throwing away ketchup packets. And then the other 3 are just like, my mom is kind of in between, I want to say, because she is pretty generous with people, but she does, she's still clipping coupons and looking for discounts. And so she kind of got the best of both worlds. But I have 2 aunts that are just like making it rain at Christmas and decorating and all kinds of stuff. So you can see that they kind of went the opposite on those. So it's not that you will follow your parents' footsteps. It's you pick, whatever you resent that they did, you tend to go the opposite way. And this may cause, if your parents were extremely frugal, you may tend to spoil your children now. You want to give them more than what you had. You're like, I don't want them to feel deprived of that. I want to provide more to them and better to them than what I had growing up. And this tends to lead to going a little bit overboard. Like we said, with if you have frugal parents, you overspend to compensate. And
I have a quick story about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, my mom was engaged to a man who would have been her second marriage, but they didn't end up getting married, and you'll probably see why in a second. My mom has 5 kids, and her fiance had 2, and they were around my age, like just a little bit younger. We were in high school, so I think I was a senior. The boy was a junior, and then his girl was a freshman. So the same age as my sister. So we were used to, single mom, 5 kids, counting pennies. But with his divorce, he felt, it seemed like he felt like he needed to spend a lot of money on his kids. And so when Christmas came around, they wanted skis and ski jackets and things like that. We grew up in Wyoming. And we were like, I didn't know, first of all, how much skis were. I didn't know people actually bought them. I thought that was something you just rented, like roller skates at roller rink. So we didn't have an understanding, and my mom didn't want us to feel deprived because the other kids were getting this. So it really caused a little bit of a discord, and eventually that was probably one of the things that broke them up. I would assume. I don't remember, but that was definitely an example of parents spoiling a child. And you're about to talk about what kind of things that will happen. The kids became entitled because at the time I was a senior and I needed a car, so I was saving money at my job to try to get a car. And the junior, the boy, said to me, well, why doesn't your mom just buy you one? And I'm like, well, she can't afford it, and it's not her car, it's going to be my car. And he's like, but that's their job. If they have you, they need to buy you a car. And I knew that this wasn't going to be the case. And I knew that, it
wasn't panning out that way.
A single mom wasn't going to be buying 5 cars. I just can't even imagine,
Right.
With her grocery store salary. So it was definitely where you could see those 2 different worlds. And that was a time when those worlds came together.
Well, and it provides, if you're providing this luxurious lifestyle for the child, when they get out on their own, they're not very likely going to be able to afford that. And if they're trying to keep up with that lifestyle, it's going to most certainly provide, with this financial instability. They're going to run up credit cards. They're going to, and you know, of course, we don't want to take a step back. We looked at that hedonic adaptation. We get used to certain things and we don't like to not have them anymore. But it is important to realize that if you're wanting to, share your love with your children, but you don't necessarily have to do that with tangible items. So spoiling kids is not a good thing. Charitable parents, this is just as bad. I mean, you think that, oh, well, they're giving to charity, then that's great. But if you have, if your child is seeing this, this very charitable, philanthropic mindset that you have, they may also have that same, sense of guilt or obligation to continue that. And if certain charities aren't as important to them, maybe having internet is more important. Running water is more important. And so, if they don't have that same level of income, it's hard for them to do that same level of giving. And so we see this where a lot of people may say, I give till it hurts because that's what my parents did. Not necessarily the way to go. And I think every philanthropic journey is an individual one. You may find that, I have friends that said that I can't afford to donate a certain dollar amount each month, but they do try to either donate their time or to try to do other things that makes them feel that they're still giving to, some form of a charitable donation. So it's important to not compare yourself with others and know that this financial journey is individual to us all. Parents that didn't discuss money. We see this a lot with the boomers, that a lot of them just, their parents didn't want to talk about money to them. In fact, my grandpa did not want to talk to my mom or four aunts about this. I was the only one in finance, and so he felt comfortable talking to me about it, but no one else knew where his bank accounts were. No one else knew what their spending habits were. And so it was just very interesting that, and my grandmother, when my grandpa passed, didn't have a card in her name. She was an authorized user on everything. And so when he passed, we said, now we need to switch the credit card to her name. And they said, she doesn't have any credit. And I said, did you see the balance in her account? Remember, my grandpa was really frugal. But they said, without credit, we can't really do that. We can do a shares or a share secured credit card. And it boggled my mind that they never did put joint. I mean, they were both on the checking account, both on the savings account, both on the CDs, but for credit, she wasn't joint on the credit card because she had no credit. So he got it and provided one to her. And money, they didn't really like to talk about this stuff. My grandpa didn't want to talk about it at all because it was seen as being in poor taste to talk about money because it was kind of braggadocious. And it has a notorious reputation for being like taboo or dirty. And in fact, women, and Tina, do you remember, I did not look at this, but I think we've talked about it before, women weren't able to get loans in their names in the past.
Right. I mean, there is something, I don't, like I said, I didn't look it up either, but I know it was sometime in the 70s when, in the 1970s, when women were finally able to get, a lot of the same access to credit that men were. I mean, that's not very long ago at all.
Right. And this feeling of foolishness, I mean, if we didn't know about it, we didn't talk about it, then it leads to a sense of, feeling foolish about financial topics and products. And without knowing certain things like this, it makes it very difficult. And, what are you going to be taught? What do you need? And I think we kind of touched on this a bit yesterday when we were talking, and I said, if I came to you and said, Tina, you probably need, or can you explain a deferred period certain fixed annuity with joint life? you should probably get that. What would you do?
I would say that sounds dangerous. I don't want to do that.
Yeah. What the heck
I
is
don't know
this
what that is.
annuity? Yeah, what the heck is this? And for that matter, what is an annuity? How do I go about doing that? What are my options? What if I need the money and I can't get to it? What happens with that? So what we see with these situations is often that it's just like, I'm going to leave it in the savings account. And, if I get like really frisky, I might put it in a CD. But we tend to see this, that since we're not sure about this and all, with all these ambiguities with it, we don't save enough, we don't invest, and we know that you need to have some equities in a portfolio to keep up with inflation. So we see undersaving, overspending, avoiding investing altogether. And we do see a few. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry. I think that in relationships, especially if one person has an understanding from beginning, whether it's from their parents or even their first job places. My first real job taught me about 401ks, and it's nothing that my family ever knew about or did. And I'm like, they sold it to me. My HR department. I'm like, okay, this seems like a good thing, but that doesn't always happen. Sometimes the HR company might not be as specific. They're like, yeah, we've got this 401k thing. If you want to join it, you can. You don't have to. And people are like, well, I don't, that's far in the future. I don't need to worry about that. And they don't understand. So when those two people, after they've had their careers for a while, get together, and one of them's like, well, are you doing your 401k? Well, I don't want to do that. I don't understand it. Well, no, you should do it. Then it becomes a conflict, just because the one person thinks that they know about it or does know about it, and the other person feels like they might feel a little bit foolish. So that's
foolish, and maybe feel like they're getting pressured into something.
Yes.
Like, I don't know about this. I feel like it's too salesy. And and some people have taken that initiative to really educate themselves with various financial products. We get calls all the time, and so someone suggested that I get this particular, or I invest in this particular thing, and what do you think? I just want a second opinion. And we like to educate and then let the people make their own decision. We don't sell anything, so we have no skin in the game. And so, but it's our job to let people know what it is. And because it doesn't, while it may be good for one person, it may not be the best product for another. And we tend to see this stuff a lot, with this not understanding of products and financial issues, when we see divorced too, but widowed people. If one person and typically you have this where one person is more, apt to deal with the finances, and then one's like, you're much better at that, you just do it, you that's your strength, and it would take me too long to learn it. We see that. So at least you may not have to dig in and read the prospectuses on every fund that you have, but it's important to at least know where money is, know where it's invested, know how it's invested, because we get this all the time, that I have no idea what Bob did with the money. I have no idea where our accounts are. I'm going to have to wait for the statements to come in. If in fact you get monthly statements, we've seen, I think it was with Gary's brother-in-law, he had everything signed up for electronic statements, and it was very difficult to find out where things were. And so that makes a huge difference
too.
Just
another reminder for our clients, we offer Ever plans, right?
Yes. And our goal is to have a whole class on just setting up a basically a digital vault for all of your information. And so we'll work on that soon too.
Yeah, we kind of got off topic. Oh, I'm sorry.
But divorced parents, this is one that you had kind of talked about already, with the two, like with the two Christmas celebrations. If you have your mom's ex-boyfriend that wanted to do all of this for the kids. Well, what is the mom doing for the kids as well? They may have these two Christmas celebrations. They may have competing gift giving. If he's buying skis and snow jackets or ski jackets, what's mom buying? A snowmobile? Is that why he has to feel like he has to compete to keep up with this? And what we typically see with divorced parents too, when we talked about this in our Blended Families webinar, we know that right at 41% of first marriages fail, 60% of second, 73% of third. So the likelihood of you being involved in a blended family is rather high. So this does typically mean two get-togethers. It may be, two Christmases, and this leads to, overspending, because we want to create this happily ever after, because we went through this divorce and it was treacherous on the kids. And so now we have to make this, this happily ever after, so they feel loved and that everything's back to normal, even though it's with someone different, but they want everyone to be happy and go skiing, obviously. This financial discord leads to arguments about money. What do you think ends up happening?
Yeah.
Same cycle. That's why you have the 60% rate and then the 73% rate, because the cycle starts all over again. If you're spending money that you don't have and that you haven't saved up for to create this false sense of happy, then you're going to fall into a debt situation again, where you're struggling with money, there's financial instability, and that's going to end up causing disagreements as well.
So I guess a plan of action really is that has to be something that you understand about each other, just like, other things in your lives, what kind of foods you like, what kind of, you might have a certain food that you always ate growing up, and the other person's like, oh my gosh, I will never eat chicken livers. It's just not going to happen. And then you've got to understand why they like chicken livers. It's something in their family or whatever. And that's the same kind of things with this. And if you love the person, you'll understand that this is just something that you need to work with. You gotta figure out how to find that balance between, if you understand that you're doing this because you love, and the other person's like, I know you love me, you can show it in different ways. Let's talk about some different ways we can do this without spending too much money, especially if they're analytic, that, they might say, well, but I need to learn how to loosen up a little bit. And then you find that balance.
Exactly. And I think by understanding, instead of just saying, well, you speak this way, you're a driver, I'm an analytic, or you're an amiable, I'm an expressive, instead of just looking at that and saying, yes, these are strengths and weaknesses we can work on together, I think it's important to understand why. And by getting to that underlying reason, maybe it will give that individual a better understanding, or that partner a better understanding of why it's so important to them. And I'm bringing up chicken livers. I obviously do not eat chicken livers. I'm not one of.
Don't either, and I like everything.
Yeah, I just can't do that. I'm not an organ person. But for New Year's Eve this year, and actually for every year when John and I got together, I said, well, New Year's Eve we have to make black eyed peas, and he's like, why aren't we making like enchiladas? And I'm like, because it's New Year's Eve, you have to do black eyed peas. And he said, I don't understand. And I said, well, let me get the silver dollar out too, because I have a silver dollar that goes into the black eyed peas. And so he's like, this is one of the most bizarre rituals I have ever seen. And I said, you've never heard of this? And and he called his dad and he's like, have you ever heard of this? And he's like, why black eyed peas? And I'm like, just do it. It's a thing, I promise. And so we went out and we Googled it, and I showed him, and I was sending, websites to him, and he's like, this is just so weird. And so, yeah, for me, that was a thing that we do. That was just a ritual, a habit, a custom that we did. And if he didn't understand that, which he obviously didn't, he was just like, but why? And so by understanding the why we're doing certain things, it helps in translating that partner's language. Why are they doing this? And once you understand why they're doing it, then you can better understand what's being spoken. And so I think only when you're both kind of speaking that, and I don't want to use the wero, iso, theo, Walmarto, but once you're both understanding that same language, then the communication it can be understood a lot more clearly.
All right.
So I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic on. So if anyone wants to ask questions, allow to talk, ask to unmute. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask them. If not, then what's our next one, Tina?
We're going to be being mindful money about our panic cushion, which it's not just emergency fund. You hear that and it's like, okay, emergency fund, but it's really it's a cushion, that you can fall on, and it's nice and fluffy is better if it's well worn because it'll hurt more coming down.
Well, and coming off of, like we mentioned, COVID 2020, and then we had Snowvid 2021, it has had a huge impact on people's finances. And I was one of the lucky ones that got a hotel room. We lost power for, I think it ended up being like, we weren't here when it came back on, but we got a notification that it was like 66 hours. And we were pulling up the weather, and when we saw real feel negative 24, you have to have heat at some of those, when it gets that cold. And we were running low on firewood, and we had borrowed and begged all we could. And we were at the point of, okay, how much do we love our bed? Because it may be going in the fire pretty soon, or our dresser or furniture, because it was that bad. We couldn't find anything anywhere. And, but we were lucky enough to get a hotel room. But if we didn't have money set aside and have a big enough cushion for that, we may not have had that opportunity. And so it is important to, and now everyone dealing with busted pipes, or I think the only casualty, did you suffer anything, a casualty on anything, Tina?
Not as far as we know yet. Haven't found anything.
Yeah, the only thing that I've noticed is certainly our pool filter looks like a can of biscuits that has been exploded. But so far our pipes have been okay. Our pool pump has been okay. But another thing that people were talking about is, once everything kind of gets back to normal, their sprinkler system. So I have no idea. I haven't turned that on yet, but it would not surprise me. Apparently PVC is better than copper for a lot of stuff. So maybe since it's PVC in the ground, then it didn't have as big of an impact as it could have. But that is our next thing. Like, what else once we get things turned on? And we won't know what the pool is going to do until we get a new filter. So Good luck with getting people out. But if you didn't have that ability to get, to go somewhere or to do something and have a big enough cushion coming off of maybe not being able to work as much last year, or having to blow through your entire emergency fund last year with COVID, this is a real thing now.
Absolutely. So we'll be talking about that March 31st. And just a reminder, if you need to get in touch with us, you can find us on personalmoneyplanning.com. Our phone number there, 940-692-6885. We're still not totally in the office, but we have our phones at home. See? And we can get back in touch with you right away.